and a special joint meeting of the Audit and Efficiency Committee to get order. We have a quorum on both committees. Mr. Koretz, Mr. Smith, and myself as the members of the Budget and Finance, and then Mr. Zine, Mr. Smith, and myself as Audits and Efficiency Committee. What I'd like to do, colleagues, is get both of the items done on the joint committee first, and then once we resolve those two, we can then go into our regular Budget and Finance Committee. Let me just also ask that if we, so we're not holding people up, is that if we can agree on the Budget and Finance side to consent items 13 and 14 and 15. We'll address 14 and 15 when it comes to council for that presentation, but if we can move that out of committee at this time.
Sure. I'll move that.
So we'll move 13, 14, and 15 on the Budget and Finance Committee, and then we'll go back to item 1 on the joint committee. And let me ask on public comment, while we're raised reading that at public comment, we have Ida, is it Talala?
Item number 1 is a communication from the Office of Finance transmitting the report entitled Office of Finance Accounts Receivable City Improvement Initiatives and a Los Angeles Police Department report relative to the current process of referring delinquent accounts to finance.
Thank you.
Do I come up now?
That's right, yes, you have a public comment, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm here probably out of context because what I'm talking about is the financing of our neighborhood councils in Dunn. I think it's very important that communities are served by all of the city's agencies. And thus far, we have seen in the community cuts to our libraries, cuts to the parks and recs, cuts to urban forestry, cuts to sanitation, public works, things that affect us directly, while we have seen neighborhood councils, regardless of the lawlessness of their activities, funded at very high levels. While all other places have had cuts, the BONC, which is the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, has added 4 new neighborhood councils. Where are those funds coming from? Are all the 89 neighborhood councils going to take a cut in order to foster their brothers and sisters new neighborhood councils? I am asking that something be looked at because neighborhood councils have to file quarterly reports. They don't, and they can get away with it. They can lose 45 out of 90 receipts and not acknowledge it. It doesn't come before the previous board nor the current board, and it's okay. While anti-graffiti programs are cut dramatically, drastically, we need anti-graffiti in our community. It is the language of communication of taggers, and we do not need that communicated around. Cuts really need to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You may be aware that the mayor's budget comes out this week, and so we'll get a first-hand view of what the mayor's proposal is for next year on all of those concerns you have.
But it's so far it's fallen on deaf ears. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. We can have item 1, if we can have city staff come up, and Mr. Zine, you want to lead this from audits?
Can you please write item number 1, please? Can you read that into the record, please? Item number 1.
Ray just did.
I'll read it again,
Oh, I'm
sir.
sorry, I didn't hear you read it.
Communication from the Office of Finance transmitting the report entitled Office of Finance Accounts Receivable Citywide Improvement Initiatives and a Los Angeles Police Department report relative to the current process of referring delinquent accounts to finance.
Thank you. If you read it, I never heard you.
It's a low voice today.
Oh, make it deep. All right, proceed, please.
Good afternoon. Antoinette Cristobal from the Office of Finance. With me today is Jeffrey Whitmore and Todd Bowie from the Office of Finance. Our report is a second report back to the Budget and Finance Committee and Audit and GE Committee on the improvements to accounts receivable in terms of increasing collections. We actually met with the CORE, the Commission on Revenue Efficiency. They have reviewed our report back, as well as met with members of various council offices, the CLA and the CAO, and we believe this report does take into consideration the directive that we have received from your committee when we presented our report back in November. So we think it is a report that will address most of the outstanding recommendations, and we do have a deck, a presentation that we could make, or we could just respond to questions from the council.
This is your
That's
guide.
it.
Why don't
Yes.
you take us through this?
Okay, I'll have Todd do that.
Todd Boo with Office of Finance. On the first page is just the background, which basically is that we've had a number of audits and studies and done over the years from the Controller's Office, via the Macias study. We have the Core Commission, and we have also the work that Council has done in making recommendations for improving our accounts receivable management in the city. And basically what we've done is we've taken all of these, put them together in this package, and basically creating a work plan from all of these various recommendations and directives. And so these are all accounted for in these documents. And so that's what we're saying here in our background piece. Now, to date, there's been some major, on page 2 here, there's been some major milestones structurally in city AR management improvements, obviously starting with the charter establishment of the Office of Finance about 10 years ago. We've had the transfer of the citywide collections unit from City Attorney to Office of Finance, which has resulted in significant revenue increases in our collections. We've had the initiation more recently of the major revenue recommendations of the Macias study. We're implementing the citywide billing data centralization and reporting. Fire EMS billing and collection technology and process enhancements are underway, and also the other major recommendation was with regard to parking citation referrals to outside collection agencies, and that RFP is pending. And then in addition to that, we have all of the council instructions, audits, and the core blueprint that is basically what the rest of this document is speaking to, and how we're going to approach these the undertaking of these initiatives. Page 3, these are basically disclaimers of sorts, but basically that this document is a summary document, and it doesn't have all the answers to all the questions, and it is something that we will continue to iteratively improve upon and move forward on, but it does basically outline how we're going to approach all these various recommendations and initiatives that are underway. So on page 4, this is the organization of the initiatives as we've bucketed them together. Basically, we have initiatives related to centralization, and then we have initiatives related to various programs that we have now currently, and also ones that we anticipate moving forward as we go forward. And so this is just basically showing how this the organization of this work, which leads into page 5 here, which is a kind of an organizational overview of how we're approaching this work. Basically, we have in the upper box there efforts related to centralization, which are very technology driven in a lot of ways. And then we have in the lower 2 boxes there, we have those types of activities that are more programmatic in nature, many of which we're currently engaged with. And others, especially in the bottom box, there are things that are probably more in the future of what we might be able to achieve as we move forward, especially in terms of establishing greater accountability for revenue collection in the city. The approach that we're taking to this is there are quite a substantial number of recommendations and instructions that we're tasked with here as not only Office of Finance but as a city. And essentially we've broken it into 3 steps in terms of how we're approaching this, and these are overlapping steps, but fundamentally in the first stage we're organizing and improving our accounts receivable data and reporting. And that leads into implementing and improving citywide policies and procedures, which then leads into centralizing accounts receivable processes and technology. And so these three steps then are basically where we break out all the different work that is entailed with this. And in the report back itself, Exhibit 1 is a list of all the different initiatives that finance is pursuing, and in Exhibit 2 is a list of initiatives that are a little bit more directed towards other specific departments and their own internal operations. You put those two together, you have approximately 170 items that the city is looking at and moving forward in, and so the preceding couple of pages here, starting with page 7, is just basically visually orienting generally how we're approaching all the various aspects of this work and how we feel that it falls together. You can see here on the top half you have our citywide reporting initiative, and this falls under our step 1, data and reporting. We have a couple of projects here that finance is the lead on. We have not only our AR quarterly reporting that we do now, but we also have the centralized billing and data warehouse project that we're currently involved with, and we're looking at a December go live for that. And as a point of reference in the lower left-hand corner here, just to kind of show how this relates back to the first exhibit, we have one of the initiatives, which was a city controller directive regarding the accounts receivable centralization project, wherein we were basically looking at leveraging FMS as a tool for implementing this project. And as you'll see here, it's reflected back under this item is corresponding item number 1 with item number 1 under the AR billing data warehouse and development. So all the items basically throughout these documents are, with regard to Exhibit 1, are reflected back in here in terms of where we see them fitting. And additionally, it also shows what we've done in terms of the status and our indicator as to where we think we are with it. The next item on page 8, these are policy and procedure related types of items, and there's quite a bit that goes on in here. A lot of things are things that are things that we are doing or are underway. There's also obviously a lot of other things that we want to get more engaged with. We have obviously a lot of revenue programs that are ongoing. And some of the other things that we're underway with right now are we're updating our guidelines, we're looking at ordinance reviews and how we can tighten those up. We're looking at the border review and some changes we might be able to make there. And so a lot of these items, while they have a citywide impact, a lot of them are ultimately also things that finance wants to be a partner in, and that we feel we can help move forward on a lot of these initiatives that fall under these buckets. And then finally, under the step 3 here, which is the centralization and technology, a lot of these are things that definitely have a citywide impact. When you talk about establishing a centralized payment portal, having a citywide customer ID system, centralized collections management, a lot of these items are things that are probably a little bit more down the line in terms of being able to realize some of them, but we do feel that there is a lot of value in these things, but at the same time, we will need more of a citywide discussion, I think, in terms of moving forward on some of these and implementing them, as they will ultimately impact a broad swath of departments across the city. The next page are just some of kind of touching on some of the things that I've said in terms of what are some of the critical success factors, and these are things like prioritization and getting departments engaged and doing all the process and the business data and process analysis, and obviously the potential for budgetary impacts in regard to moving forward on some of this work. In terms of Office of Finance, page 11, Some of the directives were aimed at, what resource requirements finance may have, and we're really looking at it just from a fundamental perspective in terms of, what it is we need to be whole organizationally. Obviously, we're subject to the budget reductions that everyone is subject to, hiring freeze and furloughs. And we have made some proposals with regard to the budget in terms of establishing like a department revenue sustainability fund, looking at a hiring freeze exemption and furlough exemption for the department. Otherwise, at this point, we're not requesting additional resources for the undertakings that we've outlined here. That's not to say that they won't be required at some point, depending on certain of how we want to proceed. For instance, if we were to proceed with having like a centralized payment portal or something along those lines, obviously there would be technology and implementation requirements involved with that. And then in terms of the next steps, obviously with 170 or so recommendations, there's quite a bit to do, and so we want to continue to report on our progress as we move forward. We're suggesting, and one of our recommendations in this report is that we continue to report quarterly on how we're doing and how we're moving forward. And also for those in Exhibit 2, for those recommendations that are not finance specific, we'd like to request to move forward in getting those councils to respond back in terms of how they're doing with these initiatives and how it is that they're going to approach them, and also report back to council with that. And as we look forward into future technology developments, that there needs to be, I think, more discussion on the roadmap for how we're going to implement various centralization technologies throughout the city. And basically, those are things that, again, finance wants to be involved with, but also a little bit beyond, ultimately, the scope of our ability to move some of these forward, especially for those things that are touching on a number of departments.
So with that, we'll open it up to some questions.
All right, thank you. What is the outstanding debt? Outstanding debt people owe to the city of Los Angeles?
Well, I think that's a very hard question to answer because the information is decentralized. It's not in any one department. But we believe that with the centralization accounts receivable reporting system that will be up and ready, I think it's December of this year, we'll have a better picture of what is truly outstanding. What we find in the information that we receive from various departments, it doesn't include correct information. Case in point with the ambulance billings, I think we touched on this before, where they are including, and of course we're working with them to resolve it, they're including amounts as an accounts receivable, when in fact it really isn't. For example, Medicare, Medicaid, contractually you can only they'll only pay you a certain amount, but what the department is including or has been including is the full amount of what they bill, when in fact by contract you can only request and collect the contractual amount. So what that does, it overstates the receivable amount. It's not money that is due to the city, and it should not be included in there. So
How many other departments do that? Put a number in that's not real.
Well, there's some departments are including intergovernmental receivables, and of course with the CAR project, the FMS project, what we're doing, we're trying to screen out a lot of the non-accounts receivable type of debt that should not be included in there, and other things.
So we don't know how much the people owe us. How far back do we go in the debt? How many years before it's wiped out?
Well, there's a statute of limitation that applies to the various
years
types
is
of
that?
debt. It depends. For example, I think with the parking citations, I think they have a 5-year statute whereby they can collect on that particular debt. Within Office of Finance, of course, it is going to be changing with the Business Tax Advisory Committee recommendation. Right now, we can we actually have for taxpayers that we discover that don't come forward and register, we can go back 8 years, and that's going to continue. But if they do register, they file timely, they underreport, we can go back 3+ years.
3+.
But it will be changing with the Business Tax Advisory Committee recommendations, because businesses, they want to have some certainty in terms of how far back we would go and audit. There are various other types of receivables. I don't know, Jeff, if you have any additional in terms of statute?
No, I mean, you've covered that pretty much. It is either 3, 4, or 5 years statute of limitations, depending on the type of receivables.
So someone who's 7 or 8 years behind, they owe us a lot of money, we're not going to be able to collect that through the process.
Well, we will if we have a lien or a judgment. I think it allows you to go back collect on 10 years, and of course you can renew that. And we believe that the lien program that is on the agenda today, where the ordinance has been implemented and we're moving forward, that will provide the city certainly more time. If a lawsuit is filed, of course, that extends the life of the debt as well.
Okay, and the FMS accounts receivable module, help improve centralized reporting and monitoring of the total accounts receivable. How many departments do we have that have accounts receivable?
There are approximately, and Todd, maybe you have that exact number.
I think it's approximately half of the departments. I have to give you a better number than that, but it's approximately half the departments do some sort of billing type of
Half of the city
activity.
departments.
But to varying degrees, some are very minute. They're in terms of really large ones, we're talking about DOT, the fire department, the public works departments, and housing and building and safety. So you have 5 or 6 that are really major.
And then airport, port, DOT, that's separate.
Proprietary departments generally are not included in the monitoring that we do.
And how have we checked to see how their debt collection services, are they more responsive getting the money in that people owe?
Well, they actually have their own commissions who actually, I guess, manage their operations per se, or gives them directives. We do know that the Harbor Department, they have reached out, and I think they have actually had debt referred to the collection agencies. Of course, we can report back on the other departments.
Because I'm trying to find out who is actually doing it right to collect that debt, and then try and model after those that are successful.
And you have different scenarios. With the Harbor Department in particular, if there is an outstanding liability, they simply refuse to let cargo or ships come into port. So they have a different kind of leverage that they use.
What about airport?
Airports we have not honestly dealt as closely with the airport. The Harbor has been relatively forthcoming in sharing with us their practices and their receivables. We've had less interaction with the airport.
So I think we need to pursue that to figure out what practice works and then target that practice, because it might be a more efficient way than we're using. And there's no magic wand, but whatever department has seemed to collect in an effective fashion. And then when this project will be completed and ready for operation, you say December?
Yes.
The FF?
Yeah, that's the billing data, warehouse, and reporting. The accounts receivable module of FMS will go live with the rest of FMS in July, and that's where departments who are using FMS as the receivable system will basically be inputting their receivables directly to that system. So what this project will do will be to take those receivables and merge it with all the other external systems that are out there, at least most of the major ones, and merge all the data into one repository.
Okay, and
Can I just interrupt 1 second?
Go
Just
ahead.
the airport, since you mentioned it. What do you mean not forthcoming? Could you explain that a little bit, or not cooperating? What are we talking about here?
Let us retract that word.
uncooperative, irresponsible.
I just want to know.
They are not mandated to report to our department.
Right.
So any information that we get from Harbor, Airport, DWP is of their own fruition and just in attempting to share data and information.
But nothing prevents us from doing a cooperative fashion.
No, not at all.
And we're not saying that they're not cooperating.
Okay,
It's just that there's not a...
If I need to
Right.
involve myself, I'll be happy to, that's all.
Thank you. So the city's Revenue Management Committee and Revenue Collections Task Force play in enhancing best practice. Can you tell me when they meet, what type of initiatives have come from these committees? Revenue Management Committee and Revenue Collection Task Force.
The group meets on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
And we have, it is composed of those departments that have receivables. They're one of the recommendations that came from the Core Commission, because there was a small group with extremely small receivables that we've exempted from reporting. But one of those recommendations is that we include everyone, just if nothing else, for information sharing, and making sure everyone is aware of best practices and processes. And that's one of the things that we've recently done, is in an attempt to revitalize that group, and making sure that everyone is participatory, and making sure that we're sharing the latest information in terms of best practices within receivables collection.
And one thing I've seen in council on occasion is someone owes us a lot of money, and we use the city attorney's resources, and the city attorney finally gets them to come up with the payment, except instead of paying us a certain amount, well, let's negotiate for a lesser amount. So instead of paying us $5 million, well, we'll pay you $1 million or $1.5 million. That practice seems to be to their advantage and a disadvantage to the public, where somehow people have taken advantage of that.
I think we have someone from the city attorney's office that can address that.
I've spoken to that representative, and they're very frustrated with the fact that they work to try and get this payment, and then somehow the individual owes us money, ends up giving, a quarter of what they should, or a third of what they owe, and not the full amount, because it's like, collect this money now versus collect nothing. So for the parking lots that we talk about, $23 million, well, instead of us giving you $5 million, we'll give you $1 million, and then we'll write off the other $4 million. It's just, that kind of practice needs to end.
Well, I mean, I would certainly agree. I think it should. Of course, I know that the city attorney's office, they look at each debt on a case-by-case basis. Of course, with the parking lot operators, I think you're fully aware of the nature of how they operate. And many times what we have to do is issue an estimated assessment just to proceed with the collection process, even to the point where it gets into litigation. And sometimes it's not until it's at the city attorney's office for litigation that they actually come forward. That is, the debtor, the parking lot scofflaw,
Right.
comes forward and provides us with the actual information. But I can tell you, my auditors, there is a period of time that they do work with the taxpayers. But we, as we indicated, there is a statute of limitation as well. And if taxpayers don't cooperate, we have to issue estimated assessments, and so that process could potentially result in a reduction, because we do estimate high. And we
Yeah, well,
estimate
that's
high
one
to
of the-
protect the city.
And they've taken advantage of that statute of limitations, and they've milked it out long enough where we don't collect the money that's due. Instead of gaining more and more interest and more interest, you don't pay your income tax, it's due today, you don't pay it, you're going to pay a different penalty. You don't pay your MasterCard, you pay it late, you're going to get a $35 assessment and everything else, and that's just the way it's going to be, and they'll keep on assessing, whereas we've been, shall we say, more than generous.
Well, I mean, I think we've been very proactive. Of course, there is an administrative appeals process for any taxpayer where they can actually go before the Office of Finance Assessment Review Officer. They can request a hearing, and then they can also go take it a step further. If they're not satisfied with the Assessment Review Officer's decision, they can go to the Board of Review, which is composed of a private citizen member, Office of Finance is represented, as well as a member of the Controller's Office. And so in that regard, they have an extended period of time that they can appeal the process. But I think the fact that we're issuing these estimated assessments very timely and promptly, I think it has gotten the attention of debtors. And most of that's done by our LA tax system,
So
which is...
how long have you been in that capacity, in your current capacity?
I'm sorry?
How long have you been in your current capacity, the department you represent?
Well, I'm the first Director of Finance for the City of Los Angeles in the Office of Finance, so it's been going on almost 11 years.
Okay, in that 11 years,
Mhm.
have you ever seen it come to this point where we seem to be getting more aggressive and more committed to it?
I would say we have gotten, we vigorously pursued debt collections. It's improved over the 10 plus years that I've been there. When I first came on board, estimated assessments were done manually, and they were done right down towards the third year before they went out of statute. So it was taking 3 years just to even issue an estimated assessment. Now what the system does, particularly for, well, it's for all debt, but the monthly, in the case of the parking lot operators, they are to remit the tax on a monthly basis. So the system is set up as such where if they don't remit, it immediately issues an estimated assessment, and it goes through that process. So it's done far more timely. We have a number of programs that under my leadership that we've implemented. The Top Tax Debtor Program. We have lockbox.
The top debtors, the most of them are parking lots?
A number of them are parking lot operators. Most of them are business tax related, but there are a number of them that are parking lot operators. And the city attorney's office, they have I think it's about 30 of those cases in litigation where we refer those cases over.
And so there's no universal application of interest and penalty citywide. Many bill types are not assessed any delinquency, penalty, or interest. Can you tell me exactly how many bill types exist citywide? How many of these do not have delinquency penalties associated with them, and why don't they?
We did do a survey, I think a year or two back. I can forward over to your office, and but I don't know the number offhand. But I'd say the majority did not apply penalty and interest. I think finance does for its tax receivables, and it was done on it had to be done through the code. So we had to make a change to implement it through the code specifically for those receivables. So we believe that it would probably take a similar effort for each and every type of receivable that's out there, would be because each one has its own nuances and its own code. So it is one of the things that is in here in our report, and in terms of setting up a process by which we could do that type of evaluation and figure out exactly how we could go about the process of applying interest and penalty on a more universal basis.
Because I think what we do is we yell a lot, but we don't really bite. And if you don't do this, this is going to happen, and really nothing happens. And people find that, and then they take advantage of it. And I mean, if we don't have a set interest, you're going to pay 10%, you're going to pay 20%. I know when you get your credit card bill in the mail, if it's not paid by that day, you're going to get jammed with interest, you can get jammed with late notice, and they just tack it on. We seem to be very generous, and the generosity we've given has really hurt our core services because we don't have money to pay for those. And lo and behold, Mr. Parks finds out in budget that now we can't meet our payments that we need to do. Can you elaborate a bit on how the sale of uncollectible debt works, and how much money do we get from these types of sales? What's the result of the first sale in December 2009, uncollectible debt that we sell out?
Our initial effort in the sale of delinquent receivables was a couple of years ago, and it was a group of judgment accounts valued at approximately $6 million. And it was, again, our initial sojourn. I think even those interested in purchasing weren't sure what to expect and what the collectability was going to be on those accounts. So the yield on those was relatively low. It was only a little over a cent on the dollar. But
a little over a cent on a dollar?
Yes, sir. But the point was, those accounts would have been written off otherwise with zero value. So I do think that it does make sense as this to be the final step in the cycle of dealing with these receivables. We have drafted an additional RFP to go through this process again. We've changed the process a little bit, and our intention is to use a broker to assist, to expand the potential pool of bidders, and we expect as a result that revenue to be driven up. So we have drafted that. We're going through the last review process now, and we hope to have that approved and on the street.
So on a $6 million debt, do we know what they collect? Do we ever verify what they say they collect?
There's no obligation for them
it?
to report back to us, but just based on my conversation and ongoing communication with them, they were satisfied with what was collected.
So they made out.
Well, I can't say that they made out, but
they were satisfied.
They have
I think they recovered their costs.
Recovered their costs.
Sir, one other thing I want to say is that, which I think you should be aware of, the debt that was sold, I think it was almost 8, 9 years old, so it was very old. And if you look at the industry, when the debt is sold, it's generally cents on a dollar. It's not.
But see, here's the
more
problem I
than that.
have, is we shouldn't let it go that long.
We totally agree.
We shouldn't let it go.
We totally agree, which is why we want to move forward with a broker. We actually use Office of Finance staff, and it was very, very time-consuming. We think the better approach is to use a broker, and as Mr. Whitmore stated, what we're proposing, which is one of the recommendations in this particular report, is for our office to come back to your committee with a draft RFP to use a broker, and have the broker actually scrub the accounts and do all of the steps, do the bids and everything, because it was an enormous amount of my staff's time, and we don't want to do that again.
So we already have some firms on hand to do uncollected debt. We're going to do an RFP to get this streamlined and make it better.
No, the firms that we have on hand are collection agencies.
Okay.
They actually do primary and secondary collection. They don't sell debt. The firms that we use when we had the initial sale of debt, we actually developed a bidders list, and it was about 4 or 5 bidders who were available to bid on the debt that Mr. Whitmore spoke about. I think what happened was that 2 of the firms partnered together, and they actually issued a bid. But as I've stated, it was very old debt, and we think that the process now should be using a broker, and we anticipate if departments are referring accounts timely through the collection process, that the debt that will be sold will be certainly not as old as 8 or 9 years old.
And are we checking with other municipalities to see what their process is, if they've got a process that works versus one that's had some pitfalls?
I can say we're on the leading edge in terms of selling debt. I think there may have been one other municipality, Jeff.
Correct, but in terms of what it is that we do, we are by far leaps and bounds ahead of most municipal governments.
So they're really in bad shape.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you state that you're reviewing and updating your citywide collection guidelines. What are you finding needs our immediate attention on those guidelines? Citywide collection guidelines. What are you finding that needs our immediate attention?
Well, principally what we've amended at this point are a lot of things related to systems and reporting. So we want to basically improve the guidelines in those areas so that we have stricter and more stringent requirements when a department decides to engage in or go after a new bill type or establish a system, that finance be involved in that process, that those systems need to meet certain requirements with regard to how they're set up and how they do their reporting. And so that's one of the more fundamental things that I think is important as we move forward, is that when new systems come online, that they need to be held to a certain standard in terms of what they're capable of. We have a default system of FMS now, and that needs to be considered as we move forward in terms of going outside or setting up a new system versus using the system at hand with the city. And we also wanted to play well with the billing and data warehouse system that we're building as well. So that to me was one of the areas that we were really looking to shore up. We've made some new requirements with regard to the reporting on the interim basis. A lot of it came from the core recommendations, and so that area as well we've made some changes to, and we've also introduced the idea of the secondary collections, and so some of the kind of tightening up some of the things along those lines. We'll be reporting back with our AR quarterly reporting as well here for the third quarter, I believe. So that information will be coming forward too, and you'll also have a chance then to see how our departments are doing and how they're complying with those requirements as well.
Okay, I got one final one. What problems are you encountering in coordinating with different departments when trying to implement a centralized accounts receivable warehouse? What issues will be hardest to tackle in coordinating a centralized unit to house all billing and collections?
There's so far it's come along fairly well. We're about to engage in the departmental data mapping, so we're going to be working with all these external systems. Some of them have vendors that maintain those systems outside of the city. So there may be some requirements there with regard to their contracts or their payments to facilitate that. That's potential bump in the road that we may encounter here in the next couple weeks to a month that we'll see. Aside from that, though, I'd say to this point, the departments we've been working with have been generally cooperative, and I think the number one thing that most of them say is, yeah, we can do this, and of course, contingent upon not knowing what the future holds in terms of their budgets and whatnot, because obviously there is some setup and ongoing workload that would ensue as a result of this project. And so that's one of the potential pratfalls. And on the other side of it, of course, is in building the system, we'll need to maintain it, and so obviously there's an ongoing need then to also be able to keep the system up and running and fluid.
But it seems for those other departments it'll be great because it falls on your back.
I hope they're seeing it that way.
Well, really, it relieves them of the responsibility.
It also provides a much higher level of transparency as well, and so there could be ultimately reservations about that as well.
Okay, Mr. Park.
I got one question. Just one question, real quick. Part of the debt happens to be when an ambulance goes out to a situation, right? It costs $1,400 to put the ambulance out, and Medicare, I think it's about $350 reimbursement, and Medi-Cal is like $300. So my bottom line is the substantial amount of the debt, forget the parking lots, which is significant, and these other issues, isn't it coming from fire?
In terms of the accounts receivable, yes, fire is about, fire and parking citations represent about 86% of the outstanding debt, but the qualifier is that a lot of that, what is reported, is not truly debt that is owed, as you have indicated, sir. With the Medicare, Medicaid, contractually they will only pay, like you said, maybe $600, but the fire department would issue a bill for $1,400. They would leave the remainder on the books, the $800.
Well, that's the budget advocates who get up and talk about all these millions of dollars confuse us, because the truth is we can't collect that money.
It's money that is not due to the city, so you cannot go after it and collect it. We are working with, I met with Chief Peaks and his staff, my staff and I, and we're working with them along with the Controller's Office to resolve the misreporting.
Yeah, because that's important, because I know 83% of what the fire does are calls for ambulances.
Yeah, right.
And that the vast majority of it are never reimbursed due to the reality of Medicare and Medicaid.
But that goes into the budget to say we're going to get it.
I think part of it also is that they have a lot of aged debt that they need to write off.
Yeah.
That's been sitting there that they haven't completed. So we're working with them on that.
Mr. Pratt.
Yeah, a couple questions. One is, you asked that we exempt you from hiring freezes and cuts and furloughs so that we can get some of these things done more timely. Have you been able to quantify how much money we're losing by doing this in a slower fashion and by allowing you to be impacted by all of those factors?
Not entirely. In our budget proposal, we did indicate what the impact would be if we're not placed on furloughs, what that impact would be. And so we don't know what direction the budget's going to end up. But we did indicate that if we are removed from furloughs, I think we indicated there's about $2.5 million in additional revenue, which we were prepared to add to the budget.
It certainly seems intuitive to me that this helps us solve a lot of our fiscal problems and do things more efficiently, that doing it more slowly is an inefficient approach.
Yeah.
How much would you say of the core plan and suggestions have been implemented or largely implemented at this point?
In terms of, I think it may be initiated. We have initiated a number of initiatives wherein finance has more say-so control over the deliverables. There's quite a long ways to go, though. There's a lot of hard work that just needs to go into it, and some time that needs to go into it, especially when we start talking about some of the other departments that are out there that have been directed to do certain things, and we don't have a particularly good gauge as to where they might be with some of these things at this point in time. But I think a lot of what CORE has put forward are things that that we recognize and we believe are also very useful for the city to engage in. And so we are committed to pressing forward as much of this as we can. But there is a long ways to go.
And I think we can actually provide an update. I mean, if you look at the exhibits here, and we didn't quantify the number, but if you look at the exhibit, many of them are underway. Some of them have already been implemented, and then a number of them are going to require next steps, as Todd indicated, technology, so that we can have a more centralized system, less manual input and work in that regard. So, and we are prepared to report back quarterly to the committee with an update.
I think we still have a problem with accountability in terms of actually figuring out, and I'm still wondering how we do this, how we get the departments to be more accountable. I know, I can't remember whether it was AEG or budget, but I know in a recent committee meeting, I was surprised to hear that I had assumed we had taken what seems like an obvious first step in every department to have a letter on city attorney stationery with the city attorney's signature at a certain point, relatively early point in time, and that every department that had receivables was supposed to do that for people that weren't being collected. I was surprised to hear that about half the departments weren't participating yet. In fact, I was rather shocked that the easiest, most logical, no-brainer first step hadn't been implemented. How do we actually achieve that kind of accountability when I know the mayor had sent out a directive saying to do it, and the departments still weren't doing it?
Well, I think, part of it is continually, well, there are a number of things. There are ways where it could be addressed where, the department head is held accountable for not complying with the guidelines. And of course, that would be something that I think the CORE actually is recommending. They're also recommending that departments who are compliant, that they have some type of incentive where they're able to use some of the money that comes back to improve their department and improve their collections. One of the things that we are planning to do with the revised guidelines is we're going to request that the mayor actually issue the updated executive directive, his executive directive mandating departments to comply. And we think also if there is an inspector general, that would be another layer as well for compliance.
We certainly know at least that person would be on it the most. I mean, that would be their task. But inspector general couldn't really create the accountability. The question is, how do we do that? How do we make this a more formal process so that a department head can't say, oh, I just didn't get to it yet, when the fact that we're not doing that is costing the city a lot of money, and there's no real good excuse for it. So can you help us figure out how we can actually make it happen?
Well,
I know
I think
it's a CORE recommendation.
I can say, sir, that with the CORE recommendations, the city council motions, the mayor's executive directive, and all of the the input that's coming from the community, that it's raising the level of attention. And I think that by requiring us to come back each quarter to provide a status. If you look at one of the exhibits, which is exhibit number 2, there are a number of departmental recommendations that have been recommended by the council, the mayor, CORE, the Macias study, where we're asking that we serve as the coordinator for these departments to come forward, provide the information. We submit it to your committee on a quarterly basis, have the departments come forward to council and to the committees to report back where they are. I think with all of the attention that it will improve, and of course the reports that we will be getting through the FMS centralized accounts receivable system, where it's going to provide a lot of detail about how well or how departments are not doing in terms of their receivables collection. So I think the attention is there, and of course, we're going to continue to work with the mayor's office, and we're asking for your support to help us as well.
Well, I guess for a little while longer, I think that might be adequate. At some point, if we still hear that some of these basic things aren't being done by departments, and we go another quarter and every department still isn't participating in the most basic common sense activities, I think we'll have to find some better way to hold their feet to the fire. But I guess for now, we can hope for at least a few more months that the much greater attention will do it. If it doesn't, we just can't let this go on, because there's much too much money at stake.
I don't understand how a department general manager who's responsible to the mayor can refuse to cooperate.
Well,
That's what I'm saying.
I guess I'm not saying that they're refusing to cooperate. I mean, as a general manager, all of our budgets have been cut substantially. I'm sorry?
Not the time to be kind.
No, I'm just saying, speaking as a general manager, all of our budgets have been cut substantially.
I'm just saying, as long as we've been sitting here for 5 years, the shortfall on all these collections come in two areas: the failure to respond to Executive Order 5, and the failure departments to do what policies you put in place. And you, as a general manager, do not have the authority to go into another general manager and make them do their job.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I don't have the authority.
That's all I would say for you.
Well, that's the thing that we need to know. Because the mayor's representative is here, and the mayor has total, complete control over general managers. And when the mayor tells the general manager, you're no longer a general manager, they come before the council. So there is a pecking order and a responsibility, a pecking order.
Watch my chickens.
Anyway, next. Mr. Smith? Bernard?
Yeah, let me just say one thing, and I appreciate all the work that you've done on this, and it's been a 5 or 6 year effort. But the areas I'm most concerned with is that on that Exhibit 2, unless the mayor's office and their deputy mayors cause general managers to move forward on those issues, we'll be in the same boat we've been for Executive Order 5 for the last 5 years. And no matter how many times and ways we write Executive Order 5 and republish it, if they don't follow it, it's of no value. And I think that's where the shortfall as we go forward. The issue that the new systems will certainly be a brighter light on those who fail, but it still will come down to the same issue of who's going to make them do their job. The one thing I disagree on is I don't think we as a city should be considering giving departments who fail an incentive when they've not done their job in the first place. And I think it's one of those issues that they get an incentive, it's called a check every 2 weeks. And the issue is that if they don't do their job, we shouldn't say, well, if you now finally collect the money that we asked you, we'll give you some of it. I just think that's the wrong tactic. So I think that the things that you put forward certainly are issues that have been worked on for the last several years. They're things that are very valuable to the city. But again, I think the shortfall is going to come down to the issue of departments implementing Exhibit 2 and departments complying with Executive Order 5, no matter what version it is. And so I think that, colleagues, what I'd recommend is that we move this report forward to the council with the recommendations from the Office of Finance. I'd also ask that we send for clarity so that the department, the budget advocates that came before council, that we send a copy of this report to them, and that we also send a copy of this report to the core commission so that they're aware of what the most updated information is as we move forward. And before I ask you to vote on those, let me ask, I think we have at least 2 members of the core commission here. If you could come up at this time. Okay, could you come up at this time? And this is the secretary. Good afternoon.
Good
I don't know
afternoon,
if you've
Chairs.
had an opportunity to see this report, and if you have, I'd like to see if you have any comments or issues or concerns before we move it to council.
Yes, sir. Indeed. Good afternoon, Chairs and Council members. I'm Ron Galperin, Chair of the Commission on Revenue Efficiency, and joined by Michael Gagan, one of our Commissioners. And thank you so much for taking this up and for giving us the opportunity to give you some of our thoughts. First of all, I wanted to begin by giving kudos to the Office of Finance for having spent clearly a tremendous amount of time on this compilation of all of these various kinds of recommendations that have been made over time, not just by CORE but by others as well. Just for the record, we had made 65 recommendations back in October. We also had a chart that clearly broke down who is responsible for what. Some of them are Office of Finance, some of them are mayors, some of them are councils, some of them are departments, many of them were overlapping, and that report was 7 months ago, almost 7 months. And we, dare I say, are still waiting to see a strong implementation thereof. And each and every single day that we wait is money that goes uncollected. And that also means each and every day is fewer city services and more people who are not on the job to do the things that the taxpayers of the city of Los Angeles expect and deserve. Our recommendations focused on centralization and on data, of course, on information availability. We also looked a lot at what are the biggest sources, of course, of the uncollecteds when it comes to the non-tax liabilities, which are, of course, Fire Department and DOT. Turning to this really quite comprehensive report by Office of Finance, there are, as I count them, 69 initiatives that are related to finance, and 26 of those 69 are core-related, with various status indicators, whether that matter has been submitted, or whether there are next steps, or whether it's been initiated, or whether it's been implemented. Of those 69, there are only 10 that are listed as having been implemented. And that's kind of generous interpretation of implementation. What we would really like to see as a way to improve upon this, and there's a tremendous amount of great work that has been done, but really to set up the timelines, to really make much more clear what the next steps are, because it's not altogether clear upon this reading. Then there are another 100 department directives which are in the Exhibit 2. 39 of those are corresponding to CORE. So 26 relate to Exhibit 1, 39 Exhibit 2, and that's 65 total. But of those 39, it's still not clear how any of those are going to get done, because they relate to different departments. There isn't one driver, there isn't one leader that's making sure that all of that is going to happen, which among other reasons is why we felt that it was absolutely vital to have that, and was an important part of our recommendations, that there in fact be a conductor or a driver or a coordinator, not just to make sure that there's accountability, which of course is the bare minimum, but also to really make sure that these departments work well together. One example, there's the parking occupancy tax, which there's been a lot of discussion about. And actually, we took this up in our commission starting in November. And we've had a number of hearings relating to it, and soon we'll be coming out with our report with our recommendations. But what we discovered very quickly by bringing together representatives from the Police Commission, from the City Attorney's Office, and from the Office of Finance, there were 3 sets of administrative hearings, 3 different parties that have some sort of responsibility, but in the final analysis, not one that had absolute responsibility for it. And hence, we have the mess that we have when it comes to tens of millions of dollars a year that are not collected in parking occupancy tax. I'd be happy to get into some detailed thoughts about some of the responses, but I'll just suffice a couple of last points on this. One is that what's still unclear in all of this is with whom the buck stops, because it stops with a lot of different folks, and when it stops with a lot of different folks, it really kind of stops with nobody. Some of it is the mayor, some of it is the council, some of it is Office of Finance, but there absolutely has to be master coordination of all of this. There also has to be prioritizations. We at CORE put 65 recommendations out. Now we have 100 plus 69, and you can't get them all done tomorrow, of course. What we believe is absolutely necessary, and I could get into detail if you like about this, is looking at what are the big hits in terms of money. What's going to bring in the money as quickly as possible? Because it's not just about fixing process, it's about money at this moment. We also very much agree with the Office of Finance in terms of their request for the proper resources. If they don't have the proper resources to bring in the money, then they're not going to be able to do it, and we very much support that. We also believe that in the final analysis, when you look at all these numbers, when it comes to that which is uncollected, they don't reflect what are some of the greatest opportunities to bring in new revenue. Because this just reflects what's been billed and what hasn't been paid. But there are also a lot of missed opportunities to bill in the first place. There are missed opportunities to think about what are the things that we can generate revenue off of, entrepreneurial opportunities for the city, and Commissioner Gagan can talk about that. There's the business tax part of this equation as well, and we have a number of recommendations relating to that. So we can focus very much on these numbers, but there's so much more out there that could generate revenue for the city that is beyond that. So we really, again, thank the Office of Finance for all of its work and for its engagement with us. And we would like to see, number one, our recommendations adopted post-haste by the council. Number two, to see just a slight revision of this with some timetables and some stronger indications of what's next. The Inspector General, which Commissioner Gagan can talk about further, and really identifying what those biggest pots of money are so that we can bring them in now. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gagan?
Mr. Chairman and members, thank you. Ron tossed several subjects to me that I won't address unless asked. I did want to say that the report that the Director of Finance has given you is a first very good step, I think, to track the 169 recommendations that have been made by various parties. We've distributed to you a matrix that attempts to take the report that Finance has provided as it pertains to the recommendations of CORE, and to indicate those in green that have been either fully implemented or partly implemented, and those in yellow that are in process or under discussion, to give you some sort of idea of how the Office of Finance report squares with the recommendations of CORE. Along with Mr. Galperin, I'll be very pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Dr. Weissman?
Thank you, sir, and thank you and all members of the committee for the opportunity of addressing this core issue. Mr. Rosendahl, far be it from us to try to confuse you as budget advocates, but in this very week I've been accused twice of not understanding the budget and being unsophisticated. So we're in agreement there. All right. Mr. Zine, my apologies for not being at your maiden voyage. I presume that Denise Zine held the first meeting of the audit committee as you and your alter ego were the chair.
Thank you.
But this is probably the biggest dollar issue in the budget as far as the budget advocates can see. One of the earliest interviews that we budget advocates had was with Ms. Cristovalli and her colleagues, and it was a mind-blowing experience. She is faced with an extraordinary number of roadblocks, exhausting administrative opportunities before the issue can be sent over for collection, has essentially immobilized effective collection because that process may take from 2 to 6 months. And in that state of affairs, it's not surprising that they're having so much difficulty in collecting and have amassed such a large past uncollected debt. We're looking forward to the fact that we are going to continue to do that unless something very major is done. I did have the opportunity to see the 2 documents from the Office of Finance. One, I think, is either 93 and 103 pages, something of that order. The other is 70 pages, which was written last November. I think the one in November was responding and receiving the recommendations from CORE. What that really is doing is perpetuating what is obviously a failed system. If you simply pass this back on to the City Council, you're saying we don't have a better way to do it. Mr. Koretz, Mr. Rosendahl, many of you have already expressed great concern for the fact that we're just not doing a very good job here. Now, the city attorney has put forward the ACE program, a technique for bringing these debts into one location. Whether the departments are defying the mayor's edict number 5 or not, they just don't seem to be organized and oriented around collecting. They have certain billing processes, and there are 25 departments that bill, but DOT and the LA Fire Department are the big ones. Next to them are the housing and the police departments. One of the larger ones in the police are the fire alarm violations. But all of these are not the kind of thing that those departments or any department want to collect. As soon as a bill is made, it should be delivered to a central billing system. That central billing system sends out the initial letters. All of us have received them at various times. You owe this much for this. If you don't pay it by that date, there will be penalties and further action taken. Once the deadline is determined, then the action is taken. ACE includes a citation. That's what ACE stands for, Administrative Citation. And a citation, as described by the document Mr. Koretz came out with a few weeks ago, is a substantial citation, $250, $500, or even $1,000 in some cases. Those deterrents should wake up the people who owe us money. The small ones, the library fines and things, that we're going to have to do something else with. But I'd like to make several suggestions that have come out of the Budget Advocates' deliberations. You have a copy of this document that I've put together. This was put together for a very fine meeting on Saturday held by the Budget LA people, and at no time have I experienced such a wide variety of views. Mr. Galpern was there to give the views of CORE. It was a wonderful experience because even though many of us in that room didn't agree with many others, we had the ability to hear and to digest what they were saying. And if that process is continued, we have success. Let's talk about the ambulances. As you know, I'm a physician. I had 40 years of billing Medicare and Medi-Cal, mostly Medi-Cal. The amounts of money you collect from those are vanishingly small. If you get $300 for a $1,400 ambulance fee, that's all you're going to get. You cannot go after any more. Now, one thing that I think you have missed, health care is not the city's responsibility, it's the county's responsibility. Now, if we negotiated with the county to say, look, we are providing a very valuable service, one of the best services in the city, life-saving. I've had a great experience with them for 25, 30 years. With that EMT group, There are no finer people, and there's no group of people who are doing more for our city than they do. However, we should negotiate with Bill Fujioka, who knows our city pretty well, and say, Bill, we are providing a piece of the health care program for the county. We will send you and let you know about all of the ambulance services, all the emergency medical services, which are substantially added to that ambulance service, and you will collect on them for the county. You have the mechanism. You do it all day long. You do it all night long, because it takes that long to do it, trust me. And we will then have a stable fund of money to support our ambulance service and continue it. Regarding DOT, $280 million of billing every year. But the controller shows that we're only collecting 140 of that million of that. The general manager of the transportation department indicates that 85% is collected. Well, if it is, it isn't showing up in our bank book. Something needs to be done to find out where is it going. DOT shouldn't be a collection agency. Take it out of the DOT, let them report it to the ACE program or this total collection program that is composed of the Office of Finance, composed of the treasurer, and composed of the city attorney, and then is ready to really do the job.
Doctor, let me just ask, I would like you to comment on the report today.
All right.
I would not like you to reiterate your
Okay. You've
other
heard it
report,
before,
because
you'll hear it
CAO and the CLA is going to respond to that.
And to your,
Okay.
that's fine, we'll respond to the CLA.
Okay,
just
fine, but today we're talking
make it
about
fair.
the Office of Finance report.
All right. I'm going to say it again. I said it a little earlier. I'll end with this for emphasis. This report and this approach is simply perpetuating a failed system. I strongly encourage you to look at this, take the whole thing apart, revise it. Revise it in terms of the ACE program, the Office of Finance and Treasury merger, and the proper position of our city attorney, and the proper position of all of our departments. If we do not do so, we just will continue doing this and end up with a penny on the dollar. Thank you.
Thank you. You have any other questions?
No more questions?
Let me just, if there's no other questions, that, again, that we'll ask that we move this, and just let me clarify a couple of things. The comments about who's in charge, I think what we've asked the Office of Finance to do, which I think they've done a really good job, is to get 100 and some odd recommendations under one umbrella to tell us what is on the table.
Of which they've done a very fine job.
And I think they requested them quarterly to come back as we walk through who's responsible and have more of a mechanical process to identify those who are not performing, will give this committee a better sense of what's going on. I think also the issue, a couple of comments were made about the Inspector General. That's item 2 on the agenda, and so we will get to that very shortly. But I think the issue that moving forward, this is not a one-time report, nor is it something that will be the solution of everything at one time. I think the 2 critical dates, for me anyway, are the July date and the December date, when the technology kicks in that gives them more tools to address the issues that we've resolved. I think also will reflect some clarity when the CAO and CLA respond to the advocates report, to come to some clarity as to what is real and what is not real as it relates to debt. And so I think those things are forthcoming. And so, colleagues, what I'd like to do is to move this with the 3 recommendations of Office of Finance and add a number 4 to share this report with the advocates and also Core Commission. And we move forward on that. And then we'll ask Office of Finance, we'll deal with your budget issues when the budget comes out. And then we also look forward to the quarterly report. We hope by the next quarterly report that there'll be an IG on board that can work hand in hand with you on the resolution of some of these issues. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Number 2?
Number 2.
Number 2, Ray.
Item 2 is basically Chief Legislative Analyst and City Administrative Officer report relative to the feasibility of creating an Inspector General position to oversee the city's revenue and collection process, and an Office of Finance report relative to a matrix of revenue management recommendations and non-tax receivables management centralizations as initiated by recommendations from the Commission on Revenue Efficiency's report entitled Blueprint for Reform of City Collections.
All right, thank you. So we're going to discuss the creation of Inspector General to oversee the city's revenue and collection process, and the Office of Finance report relative to the matrix. So,
The matrix is superseded by number one. The matrix on number two is superseded by number
we don't
one.
have to worry about that in matrix. Okay. So, well, you have, on this particular matter, number two, if I can have the finance, CAO, CLA, city attorney, come forward, please. Why is this new position being housed under the CAO and not Office of Finance? Since it's going to be revenue collection, it would be logical to go under the Office of Finance versus the CAO that's not involved in collecting money. So if each of you can respond to that.
Well, actually, Maria Gutierrez with the CAO's office. I would like to call to your attention an action that the council approved as part of the mid-year FSR. In the mid-year FSR, $150,000 was transferred to the CAO's contractual services account with the intent that this funding would be made available for an Inspector General. The details of that process are still being worked out in conjunction with our office. Also, there have been consultations with the Council President's office and the Mayor's office as well, and those details are forthcoming.
So I understand why the initial appropriation was put there, but when the Office of the Inspector General if it is established, it doesn't deal with the finance, it deals through the CAO, which is not involved in collecting money. Yet it will be involved in collecting money and making sure that process is completed in a proper fashion.
And that is correct.
Why wouldn't it not be logical to put it in another,
Well,
in the police department, where they can go out and collect the money?
I think what Maria had mentioned earlier, there's still some...
I can't hear you, Ray. Can you speak up?
Maria had just mentioned there's still some details that need to be worked out. I think the reason why the 150 was put in our office is because of our dual reporting relationships to both the mayor and council.
You have no expertise in collecting money. You spend money.
Well, we would... No, we try to make sure the dollars are spent in appropriate fashion within the dollars budget. But we were going to be actually putting out an RFP to basically solicitate individuals to actually come in and be the IG. Like was mentioned earlier, though, it hasn't quite been firmly established on where that position will actually meet. I mean,
it might be someplace else.
You know what? It is still open. We've been in discussions with the CLA, we've been in discussions with the mayor's office, and also the council president. And there's still some
where it ends up. Okay, I thought it was already a confirmed direction. Okay, thank you for that one. So, what role do you see the new position, executive director for revenue efficiency, having, which will be different from the Office of Finance? The Office of Finance is in charge of collecting money. So, what will this Inspector General, revenue efficiency, what will they do that Office of Finance can't do?
What the new position will do is actually complement our efforts. It would be an individual or a contractor that would actually submit separate reports to the mayor and council as to how the departments are doing. We are understaffed, so I think having that additional assistance will help us move programs along. There are some recommendations that we've noted that we could better suit the IG to handle while we work on some of the other areas. And so by partnering with the IG, I think that will help. And of course, there will be an independent report separate and apart from Office of Finance or any other city department that will come from this position or this contract.
But see, I don't see us needing reports. What I see us needing someone to actually collect the money. We can do reports upon reports upon reports. But if we're not collecting the money, we're not doing anything. I mean, the issue is people owe us money, and we have not been as aggressive as we should have been to collect the money. And general managers haven't been responsive, and the fire department puts in estimates that are outrageous for the ambulance service, which we know we can't collect, but we put that in the budget to say we have a big budget. See, that's the whole thing I'm looking at. The bottom line is, how is this person or people going to assist you and your department to collect the money? That's my concern. We don't need more reports. We have more reports than we need. We need someone who's going out there, like Marshall Dillon goes out there and collects the money. That's what we need. Well, you know, I talked about Italy and how they collected in Italy.
I was waiting on you to say that, sir.
Every time I tell you they collect. They don't have delinquent accounts in Italy.
Right.
They have a very aggressive enforcement branch of the Italian government that goes out there, and they collect the money. And I saw that, so I mean, I got pictures of it, seeing how they collect the money. So anyway, my concern is, if we could add money to your department, so you would be more aggressive or have the resources to collect the money, but I don't see us having another executive position to write more reports to say this is what we need. We need to actually do it. And you got a nice speed car there, but until you start the engine, it doesn't go anywhere. We need to get the movement. That's what I'm looking at.
Well, I
It may be
think-
very practical, but
Right.
it's the simple solution I see.
Well, there are a number of recommendations, so I think having some assistance would help. But one of the things I do want to state is that with this centralized reporting that we talked about with the FMS reporting system, what it will entail, it will provide substantial information for our office that we could use to advise the mayor and council on things that needs to be improved. The other
But I'm
part,
talking-
the other part to that.
Talking about this other thing. I'm not talking about what you'll be able to do with the FMS. I'm talking about this Inspector General position. What purpose is that going to serve that you and your department, we got the treasurer, we got the finance. I'm just saying, what are they going to, they're going to give us a report? We don't want any more report. We want money so we can run the city. That's what I'm looking at. The bottom line is, how is this person going to go out there and collect the money? Because your office can generate reports. You've already done a good job of doing that. And if the money would be more appropriate in your department to give you the resources to go out and get that, I'd be happy with that. I just can't see the benefit of having another person give us more reports on how to do it. We need to actually do it.
Okay.
That's where I'm coming from.
You want to say something?
I was just going to say, I think that the one thing we anticipated from that position is that they would have a closer one-on-one working relationship with some of the departments to monitor on a regular basis what it is that they should be doing and being able to report back more quickly as to where they lack.
Then I say
making
again,
progress.
why couldn't we put that position in the Department of Finance with the appropriation to do that?
Well, I think part of it, sir, is, I mean, unless you have a completely centralized system where you have all of the billings, all of the collections done under one umbrella.
Which is what we're going to do.
Right, but there are phases
Right.
that steps that you have to take. Part of it is tied to technology, and this CAR project is part of the technology. I think it's an iterative process, and there are phases, steps that we have to take. I guess what I'm just saying is that just having some assistance, whether it's providing additional resources to finance or having an outside body, I think we welcome that because we think we need some help there. We thought that by having this IG position, particularly with the 65 or 9 recommendations of CORE, that would help us move things along because we are short-staffed.
And that's fine and dandy. I just want to make sure that we put the money and the resources where we can generate what we're trying to generate, which is collecting money, debt to the city. So the position calls for $200,000 in cost. Does it include staff? If not, how much staff will the position require at what cost?
I think that's CAO-CLA.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the $200,000 estimate that we identified back in our November report would, the thought was that would pay for a consultant as well as any support staff that person would require.
Okay, so now we're talking about a consultant. I thought we're
That was
talking...
that's where the $200,000 figure came from back in our November report. And that's the $200,000 is being mentioned, I believe, today.
Understand.
The 150 was supposed to pay for basically all the resources required to put
So
this.
are we talking about a consultant, or are we talking about a city employee who would be the
Well-
Inspector General.
The funds that were transferred to the CAO's office were transferred to the contractual services account, so one would presume that the intent was a consultant. If the,
Not a permanent position.
it would be a temporary position.
It's only 2 years.
Okay, all right.
Right.
So the difference between releasing an RFP for this position and a sole source, we need to do an RFP for this, I understand, and that's being processed through the different entities. Okay. And what authority will this new position have? The main focus will be to coordinate with departments. What will this position have that the Office of Finance does not already have? Obviously, the lack of cooperation from general managers with your office, but what will this person who's a consultant have with departments that you as a general manager, a full-time city employee with a staff? What clout will they have that you don't have?
Well, I think it's just, it's really more of just complementing our efforts. So, as I've indicated, if we had adequate resources and staffing, of course, we could address it. The Inspector General position is really a short-term position. I think the intent is to have an Inspector General on board for maybe about a year and look at maybe 1 or 2 year 2 additional years renewal if necessary. But I think just, on the short term, just getting some assistance, whether it's adding additional resources to our office or creating a new separate position, we think that that would help.
Okay, so we're not creating more bureaucracy. What we're trying to do is assist the Department of
Right.
Finance, Office of Finance, in getting the mission accomplished of collecting money. Whatever resources.
Working with the mayor, the city council, the city controller, the city attorney, and all of the family, city family members.
Okay, so the appointment of this executive director of revenue efficiency recommendations would hopefully get done in a quicker fashion, which would generate more dollars into our fund.
That is the expectation.
And we're talking about somewhere between 1 to 2 years.
In terms of the full centralization, that's over a number of years, yes. With the Inspector General, we're looking at 1 year, I think is what's in their report.
1 year?
With the possibility of extending for another 2 or 3 years if necessary.
See, I look at it this way. You're the person who's responsible for collecting money.
Right,
You need resources.
right.
It would be my opinion for us, if we're going to have an expenditure, to give the money or the position in your office of finance and say, okay, this person is accountable and responsible to you to get done what you need to get done, versus working someplace else. We don't want to disconnect. We're trying to pull things together to the bottom line of generating these dollars that have been sitting around not being collected. And I just look in a very practical fashion. You're the person who we hold accountable. This gives you the ability to have someone help you in getting done what you need to get done because you don't have all the resources you need. Am I correct?
It definitely will help, sir.
There you go. You're politically correct sometimes, but like Mr. Park said, say it like it is. Now you're looking at, oh my goodness.
Mr. Chair?
All right, that's all I have.
If I could say something, I think to be a little less politically correct, I think this job is someone that is supposed to ride herd on all the departments that aren't doing what they're doing and be a thorn in their side until they actually get it done. And
But what power do they have, Paul? That's the question.
I think they have the power that we allow them to have. I mean, frankly, the mayor has to put his power behind this. The council has to put his power behind this. This person, I view as someone that keeps coming back to us and saying, well, general services isn't doing this, and somebody's got to do something about it. Now, if you leave finance to do that, they're going to be the most unpopular department in the city.
They're not going to be popular. They're collecting money.
But it makes it harder for them to do their job. This person's goal, I think, is to become the most unpopular person in the city until we have everything implemented. And once they've done that in a year or two, and we have all these systems in place, their job may be worth millions of dollars to us. If we didn't have someone in there being a total pain in the butt, making this happen, which we don't, it's part of why a lot of these things haven't been implemented for years.
Anything else, Paul?
No, it's just that thought.
Pain in the butt job.
I agree with him. That's all.
Rick?
We got to move on it.
I got a couple.
Okay, why don't you go to the question?
Okay, but, Dr. Weissman and Ida Falalia? something like that.
Let me ask, while they're coming up, Ray, do we have any idea when and what the status of the RFP, or when we could expect the discussion about the position becoming a reality?
I think we'll have discussion when we actually see the mayor's proposed budget, because there are funds that are allocated for this. So we will have this discussion again. Now, the question is going to be raised, though, while we receive the money for this year, the question will be where that position will go in the future. And that is one of the things, that issues that doesn't need to get worked out.
Well, I think where it goes in the future is in part two, but we had set a goal in 2010, I thought, to get this position hired before the end of 2010. And we're in the second quarter of 2011. So our expectation is to hire it before the end of this fiscal year, I would think. And so we need to, because back in November, we did some report that listed about 8 things that we should be doing to get this thing rolling. And that was hopefully to get it done before the year's out. And so
We're running out of time.
while we get the guests, our public speakers up, I'll come back to that question when they get finished.
So if we could have the doctor come forward along with Ida Talala. Is there Ida here? Talalla. Not here. All right, doctor, go ahead.
Thank you very much. This one's easy, also short. The budget advocates, when they were putting together the white paper, which you have, or I have some extra copies with me now if anybody wants one, reviewed the core recommendations, reviewed the controller's audits, and supported them, and certainly supported the idea of Inspector General. One of the things the Inspector General do that I haven't heard comment on yet is to try to gather some real data. We do not have good data on how many billings are done by how many departments, so we know what we might otherwise expect. If we're going to have a collection agency, we ought to know what is collectible, and I think that Inspector General may be able to serve that function. Whether that makes him liked among his peers or not, I don't know. I don't really care. It's a good function. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that's our only speaker on this matter. So what we want to do is hold the matter in committee, request the CAO, CLA, City Attorney, Personnel Department to respond to the instruction of the Joint Committee, because we can't make a decision on it. We're going to keep them.
Let me ask you, June, why don't you come up and give us what some of our options are? Because I'd like to see that we at least give some direction to it.
If we don't agree that an RFP is necessary, because that really is going to take longer. We think, it really would be more expeditious if we released an RFQ. That has not been prepared, but in terms of moving backwards, executing the contract, we think that the most expeditious time frame that could be completed is somewhere between 3 to 4 months. A second option would be having further discussions with the city attorney relative to seeking a qualified individual for which they would feel comfortable in approving a sole source. So in terms of the second recommendation, that's not something that we have discussed in any great length with the council leadership, nor with the city attorney's office, but certainly, that is an option that could be available to us.
I was told the city attorney was opposed to a sole source. Is that correct?
Well, the charter is very clear in terms of under what circumstances a sole source could be allowed. We think that if we sought a qualified individual who has unique qualifications, the city attorney could be amenable to approving a sole source, and that would be legally permissible.
If it's going to take 3 or 4 months, then that's going to go way beyond what we anticipate.
Let me just ask, this is our last meeting before we go into budget. We need to have some clarity on what are the options, and even if we have to take it during the budget hearings to address this so that we can move it forward as quickly as possible. So we asked this, back to that November 22nd report, that we asked the city family that was asked to do this to get together, and that within the next 2 weeks, wherever we are, if we're in budget committee, that we find a way to get this on the agenda so we can get it resolved.
That was the CAO, CLA, City Attorney, and Personnel Department.
The only other thing I'd ask is that Mr. Galpern is still here.
He's here still.
Could you come up and just clarify, being it came out of your report, what this position in your mind would do?
So we're going to hold this with somebody, right?
What is that? Okay, then let's just continue it to that. Why don't you give us an idea, being that you had great discussion and proposed this, it was a motion, I guess, that came before this, but what is your view of what this position will do?
Good afternoon again. Just to begin with, if we're happy with the way that things have been, then let's keep doing the same thing. However, if we're not happy with it, then it's time to do something different. And that is part of why the Commission on Revenue Efficiency recommended this. First of all, we looked at different motions that have been brought in the past in terms of collection sheriff, collection czar, etc. We also studied the city charter, and what we decided was we looked at why those other things didn't happen, and we sought to find a way to kind of thread a needle so that there could be ways to fix problems that could be fixed and bring some money in. Not redo the charter, not redo the structure of everything, not create a new bureaucracy, but something that would last 1, perhaps 2 years, fix things, bring in some money, and then move on. Part of this is about doing independent and objective reports. Now, mind you, the Office of Finance is beginning to do some more of those reports. But what we know is that the Office of Finance is another department and has problems exercising authority over the other departments, which is why, by the way, that we recommended most likely that this be done through the mayor's office. There are other options as well, but that's what the core report said. And one other thing I think that is worth noting here, which is that it is very important to hold everybody's feet to the fire and to report on what they're doing. But there's another dimension to this as well, which is the much more nuanced one. And it's about how do you work with the departments to look at why something has not been done and figure out a way to get it done. You look at Executive Directive Number 5, which had 7 directives from 2005, and 50% of them are not still in compliance. Now, we can continue to beat up on everybody for the fact that it hasn't been done, or we can figure out why it hasn't been done and help them get it done.
Right on.
One perfect example being interest and penalties. What was identified by a variety of different reports was that a lot of these departments were not doing it. Now, mind you, for 50% of the various kinds of receivables, not 50% of the dollars, but 50% of the receivables. And so the departments were instructed, go research what other cities are doing, go figure it out on your own, and then go and present a model ordinance to audits and governmental efficiency. Well, it didn't happen. Surprise, surprise. What could have happened and what should have happened was more coordination and to look at an omnibus approach to it. Go work with the city attorney's office, create an omnibus kind of ordinance, look at where it can and can't be done, present it to the departments and say, speak now, forever hold your peace, we're doing it in 30 days, and it would have been done. And that's what this is about.
Okay. Thank you very much. We were just advised that we have a meeting, a joint meeting on budget and finance and arts and parks, I believe, at 1 o'clock next Monday.
Arts and Parks, not...
But I would think we were going to, if we continue this for a verbal report from the city family to find out what progress they've made, it would be the only meeting we have before the budget.
Let me ask this. Have they had any meetings with the departments that have already been cited?
June?
Personnel, city attorney, the departments we discussed, CAO, CLA, city attorney, have they ever had any meetings on this matter yet? From November 2010? According to the notes?
Sorry, sir, what was your question?
The question is, have they had any meetings yet on this particular subject matter with the CEO, CLA, City Attorney, and Personnel Department? Have they met to discuss any of these items as of yet?
I'm sorry, I don't know who they is.
They, meaning CAO, CLA,
Oh.
City Attorney, and Personnel Department, as of November 22nd, 2010, they were given direction to discuss this particular Inspector General. Have they had any meetings? Question.
We've had informal discussions with the council leadership,
No,
and
not the council leadership. The CAO, the CLA, the City Attorney, and the Personnel Department. Have they met with those departments?
we have had informal discussions with the various entities. However, the issue was there was no funding. The funding was not approved until very recently through the FSR, and so now the funding is there. We will certainly earnestly pursue
So those
filling the
need
position.
to come together. That's the key.
June, let me ask you, could you get with them and have these discussions and come back with a verbal report for next Monday at 1, and we schedule, I guess, 2 joint meetings? We have the Arts Parks and then audits and budget and finance.
Well, audits is not available next Monday, Mr. Parks. Audit, I already have another meeting scheduled for next Monday.
But
Is this a special or is this the regular meeting
This is
today?
your, especially, but the
Hey, just out of curiosity, when we gave direction in November to create this position, were we ever told that staff was sitting on it waiting for funding?
I think what happened on that is, I think they were moving forward, and they were given direction from council leadership on going in another direction, and the city attorney gave advice that that was not a direction in which could be done legally. And I think they've just come to that conclusion.
That's what that,
So that conclusion was we couldn't legally do what we
What,
just asked them today to do?
No, not what we asked them to do, what was being proposed by council leadership. As far as sole source,
that was-
They couldn't do what they were asked to do, they just determined that recently.
that was with council president, not council leadership.
Okay. All right. So that's very recent that they found out that they could not move forward on that request. So now they have determined there's another way to go about with either looking at sole source in a different fashion or an RFQ. So that's what we are.
Okay. I can't make it on Monday, I already have another meeting. It's not a scheduled meeting.
But the thing is, the majority of the committee can be here. Being that you and I are the majority of the committee.
You guys can be here.
Come on, you can be here.
I got another meeting.
Just cancel it. Jesus Christ.
We will work with the chairs of both committees to make sure we hear this item.
Okay, So we're going to continue this particular item to next Monday
At 1 o'clock.
at 1 o'clock, and whether I'm here or not will be decided at a later date, but
He'll be here.
that'll be the
He can control
conclusion.
himself.
So this is going to end the Audits and Government Efficiency Committee,
Yes. All right.
and Mr. Parks and Mr. Smith, you get to stay and I
We'll
get to go.
continue item, 1A till Monday, and on item 1B, we'll
Thank you,
receive
Chairs
and
and Council.
file, because that matrix
So it's
is...
item 2.
Two.
continued
I'm sorry,
to Monday.
2. Sorry. 2A will continue to Monday. 2B will receive and file because it's superseded by 1 on the agenda today. Okay? Thank you. All right.
So the next items are the closed session
Let me
items.
do this. Before we go to closed session, it may streamline a couple of things. If we can ask the Office of Finance to come up and explain to us the new lien policy that addresses item 3 and 4. Once that explanation is given, we can probably move item 3 and 4 on consent.
Okay,
Just explain to us.
Yes. I will. This particular program, it's a lien program. It's a program that we included in our budget package, and it was approved by the mayor and council. The city attorney's office, they prepared an ordinance which was approved and adopted by the council. It went into effect in September. Office of Finance, in collaboration with the city attorney's office, we put together procedures based on the ordinance to implement the lien program. We started sending lien letters, lien notices, the end of December, and to date we've collected almost $700,000. Our goal is to collect $1 million, and we think that that is something that will likely happen. We've issued a number of lien notices. 12 of the debtors have paid and settled their debt. 4 of them are in installment agreements. The notices that we send 3 notices. The first notice is a notice of a referral to lien program. The debtor is given an opportunity to respond and come forward and settle their debt. If they don't, they're issued a second letter, which is a notice of intent to lien, and we give them 10 to 15 days to come forward. Those letters are sent certified. And then the last step is the notice of lien hearing, which is where we are today. We actually issued 3 notice of lien hearings. However, we have been able to settle on one of the lien debtors who actually, one of the debtors who came forward and paid their debt. So they're not even scheduled for Budget and Finance, and we're very pleased that the debtor came forward and settled. We have 2 outstanding lien requests. One, the debtor has expressed an interest in setting up an installment agreement, and we're hopeful that that will take place before it goes to full council. And then the other is still outstanding. So for now, we're asking that the 2 proceed with the expectation that one of the debtors will come forward and enter into an installment agreement.
A couple of quick questions. What's the timeline that you give them to settle the lien?
Well, in this particular case, what we're asking is that they come forward. We've sent them. We have an installment agreement that we're hoping that they will sign, pay it up, make an upfront payment, and that be in effect before it goes to full council. We understand that the 2 lien items are scheduled for next Wednesday's full council.
So they've been given their full amount of time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The other issue, how do these liens impact them continuing to do business?
Well, it stays on their record. It's posted. We post it with the Secretary of State if it's personal property, real property. It's posted with the assessor's office, and I believe it stays on until the debt is paid. It may or may not impact their credit. We're actually looking to see what the Secretary of State and others, the county assessor's office actually do in terms of posting on their debt on the credit bureau. We know this information is public information, so it will have an impact in terms of the debtors, conducting their business, we believe. And we're also looking to the extent possible to have the banking accounts encumbered for the debtors that we've identified their accounts.
Do we have an idea on the amount of revenue this may generate in this next fiscal year?
No, but we don't. What we've included in there is really the $1 million carried overs in the base. The reason we didn't increase or decrease it is because the program just started, the end of December. As I've indicated, been working very collaboratively with the city attorney's office, and of course I want to thank my staff and the city attorney's staff, in particular Ms. Beverly Cook and her staff, working with us. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to expedite some additional liens. We do have a number of them that the city attorney's office is reviewing, and so I can't say what additional amount over the $1 million. I think we can report back later on this fiscal year.
And then just give us what our authority is. In reviewing these, I understand we can approve them or reject them, but that we do not have the ability to alter or reconstruct them. Is that right?
I think the city attorney can speak to that.
Good afternoon, Valentin Dino, City Attorney's Office. The ordinance that allows the imposition of these liens does not envision a reopening of the administrative process and doesn't give the taxpayer any rights. And basically, the inquiry of this body should be limited to the technical aspects of the lien. In fact, is the taxpayer's name correct? Is the amount of tax, interest, and penalties correct? Are the tax periods for which the lien was is going to be recorded correct? And that's about it.
If a person came before us, either in committee or in council, and expressed their concerns, that is beyond and above any of the appeal processes that are legally given to them.
Well, if the taxpayer wishes to address this body, basically the taxpayer has a right to address it. That's a Brown Act issue, and the taxpayer can actually go deeper into the substance of the lien, but he or she would be limited to expressing his own or her own concerns.
But by the time they came before the committee or the council, they would have exhausted all of their appeals.
The ordinance contemplates that the lien will not be recorded until the administrative process has been completed, so the answer is yes.
Okay. Do you have something?
Just one thing, the report staff just advised me that for item number 4, the debtor has come forward and delivered a check and is working on installment agreement, so we would be seeking to actually have this removed when it goes to full council.
Okay, so item 4 has now been paid?
They're working with us. They have.
So what do you recommend, that we move it to council, and by that time we'll know for sure?
Yes.
Okay. All right, colleagues, I would ask that with that explanation that we move item 3 and 4 on consent. So moved. Okay, so that, we'll move that. Now we'll go in closed session on the remaining closed session items.
No, number 12. You don't want to do 12? You don't want to do 12 now?
Yeah, you can't go through. Oh, okay. You want to do 12 first? Okay. All right, let's go 12 first. We have 4 cards. Ann Williams, Sister Karen Collier, Betty Steele, Beverly Kenworthy. Y'all come up to the front table.
So item 12 is a CAO verbal report, city attorney reports, and ordinance amending the Los Angeles Administrative Code in order to create a responsible banking reporting procedure in the city of Los Angeles.
Ma'am,
Okay. Good evening.
give your name. Good afternoon.
Thanks for thanking me. My name is Betty Steele. I am a homeowner in South Central LA, the ACE district, and I'm also a member of ACE. The foreclosure crisis has really hit the ACE district really hard. And it's time for the banks to take some type of responsibility for this. A few months ago, along with Councilman Park and Gil Garcetti, we announced the foreclosure registry ordinance to make sure the banks clean up blighted vacant properties in our area. And so far, that's been working. But we also need the banks to work with the homeowners before they actually go into foreclosure. Many longtime homeowners in my community have tried to get banks to work with them, and they are completely being ignored. Recent reports show that major banks are rejecting the vast majority of homeowners who apply for a permanent loan modification. And that's why the city should hold the banks accountable, that they invest billions of dollars in by rating how much the banks are really helping the loan modification and to avoid foreclosure. And if other cities can do this without incurring a major expense, I believe we can too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Beverly Kenworthy with the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. I just have some general comments. You know, there are a lot of people in this room who are suffering under our economy right now, and I don't think that anybody can deny that. And I'm just wondering, like, what kind of outreach we've done with our banking communities and what realistically we expect an ordinance like this to do and whether it's enforceable. And what I'd really like to see is that these issues be addressed in a real way, but that brings, you know, community members to the table with some of our banking members and banking representatives here in the city who I believe do want to work with the community. And I'd like to see something like that happen because I'm not so sure that an ordinance either meets either legal standards or isn't duplicative of something that's already being done and handled by the federal government. So I'd like us just to, you know, consider those things and explore those things. And, you know, if we pass an ordinance and we have unreasonably high expectations, I think we're going to leave a lot of people disappointed, and we're going to leave a lot of people out of the process that could actually be beneficial to the work that we're trying to do. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr.
Hello, my name is Naeem Shaw Jr. I'm the Assistant Imam of Masjid Ibadullah, located at 2310 West Jefferson Boulevard, here on behalf of LA Voice, and I would like to pass this mic at this time to Sister Karen.
Good afternoon. My name is
Are you through with your comment?
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Sister Karen Collier. I'm the Parish Life Director at St. Agatha's Church in Mid-City, Wilshire District. We are members of LA Voice, the federation of 22 churches, synagogues, and mosques in 6 city council districts here in Los Angeles, representing 30,000 families. Families continue to suffer the impacts of a relationship between banks and our communities that is really out of balance. It's out of balance with respects to loans for small businesses, affordable housing, and it's out of balance with respects to foreclosure, whose numbers will remain in record highs this year. This responsible banking ordinance monitoring programs does just that. It monitors banks for responsible behavior in LA. The information it requires by using our own almost $8 billion banking portfolio is important for all of us and will aid the city treasurer, council members, individuals, and community organizations in making choices about partners in building the city. We appreciate the report, and we really look forward to a final written report as soon as possible. We met with the city treasurer this week and expressed to him that we have many partners, including experts in Cleveland and Philadelphia, the National California Reinvestment Coalitions, and friends also in the banking industry who are willing to help make this ordinance successful in its implementation. So LA Voice believes a balanced relationship between banking institutions and our city will benefit us all. And this ordinance will help us to do just that. The sooner, the better. This week, Christians celebrate life's power over death, and the Jews ponder and celebrate liberation from enslavement. So let us continue to build a city of life and liberation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Williams with the Central City Association, representing over 400 businesses employing over 350,000 people in the Los Angeles region. And we have significant concerns about this draft banking ordinance. We submitted a formal position letter a few months ago, and we were joined by the LA Area Chamber and VICA on that letter. So you have our official statement. But first, we want to acknowledge that there is a lot of anger and frustration directed toward the banking industry right now, of course. However, this ordinance will do nothing to address those problems, and I just want us all to have clear expectations about that. This effort, we believe, is misguided, and the only thing it's going to do is create a new bureaucracy that the city doesn't have the resources to develop or implement or maintain. Instead, the city is going to be burdened with a new program that creates a mountain of paperwork with little to no real effect. We're curious about what are the costs and personnel requirements for collecting, analyzing, and organizing the substantial amount of information that we think is being requested. At the same time, the ordinance is vague and unclear and subjective, which undermines the stable, well-understood regulatory environment that's so critical for both the city and the banking industry when they conduct business with each other. All of these issues arise without achieving relief for Angelenos suffering in this great recession. So we're working with the banking industry to open the lines of communication with City Hall, and we respectfully ask for some more time to see how much progress we can make in that regard. I think we have made progress, but we don't want to create lasting, costly effects for the city and the banking industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a representative, Mr. Alacon's office.
Thank you. I don't want to hold you up, so I'll just be very brief. Councilman Alarcon is unable to attend today, so he asked me to be here and make 2 quick points. One,
identify yourself.
I apologize. I was following on you. Saeed Ali, Chief Deputy for Councilmember Alarcon, 7th Council District, and the author of the motion. Councilman asked me to emphasize 2 points for you. First one is there was an issue of the cost for implementing, and he has offered $250,000 from Council District 7 implementation funds for purposes of implementation. Secondly,
will that cover the whole thing?
yes,
Okay.
that's our understanding. CAO and the treasurer may have revised it, but that was the number that was given to us. And I understand this motion will come back for full consideration. I'm not sure when.
Well, let me just say this, as soon as you finish, we're going to have the treasurer and the CAO come up, make a presentation, because the 10 or 12 things that we asked them to do came out of 3 different hearings that we've had, and that report has not been completed. So we want to get a status, and that's why it's on the agenda today.
I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
What was your second point? Did you make it?
That was the timeline.
Okay, can we have the treasurer and the CAO come up? Let me just comment that this item was heard in this committee on the November 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd. And during those 3 hearings, there was about a dozen issues that were brought up by the committee. And we were asked to give about 60 days to respond to them. And so we just needed a verbal update of where we are on those items and what is the timeline that we could expect a formal report.
Diana Mangiolo, Office of the CAO. The CAO's office and the Treasurer's office met recently, and we went through all of the questions. We divvied them up. They're going to be taking about half, and we're going to be taking half. We've also asked City Attorney to take a look at one of the questions on the list of 13. So, and with regards to those questions, one of them was regarding meeting with community groups. So we're in the process of developing a list of those groups that have been vocal about the proposed ordinance, and we'll be setting up a meeting soon and contacting those organizations such as the CCA, the Chamber, VICA, LA Voice. And in the meantime, what we've done, as you know, is at least from the underwriting side, the CAO's office has incorporated a corporate citizenship criteria into our RFQ.
They just briefed us last week on that.
Yes. So, but we will be reporting back to committee after budget, and we're expecting end of May.
End of May?
Yes.
Anything for the treasurer?
Good afternoon, Steve, interim city treasurer. Among the 12 questions, we were responsible for 6 questions, and at this time, we don't necessarily have, we don't have a draft report. These questions came to light, as far as we're concerned, just a couple of weeks ago, and it's been pretty difficult in trying to respond to this. But I will tell you that some of the questions I can give you preliminary answers, but not a report form kind of answers.
Let me just ask, I think what we need is something that's comprehensive.
Okay.
So if you figure at the end of May, if we can reschedule this, budget will be what, into the end of May, early June?
The first meeting after budget.
Was it going to be the 23rd?
It was June 30th.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, we'll drift in, what is our date for the budget, to June?
Well, I think
we can do
we're
June.
talking about having a meeting on the 23rd, but for council.
First week of June. When do we plan our next budget meeting after that? Is that second or third week of June?
Well, he wants to have one on the 23rd, right?
Well, we may because of the FSR, the year-end FSR.
Okay. Whatever that meeting is.
You laugh.
If
We do have to wrap things up.
Yeah, whatever that meeting is, if we plan for this to be brought back with a formal report.
Councilmember, if I may just ask or request, we're pretty low on resources in terms of staff in our office, and just to avoid the appearance of summer studies in what we try to do here, I would really recommend or request that we go to like end of June as opposed to.
But I think that's where we're headed, because the budget is in council the first week of June 5th, whatever the meeting is for the FSR between the 5th and the end of the 30th. That's what we planned for this meeting. So we have a formal report to respond. And again, these 12, 13 questions, I'm sure you're going to find other issues that are relevant as you talk to community groups and banks, and we certainly want you to feel free to add that so we get the full breadth of what the issues are, and also incorporate the issue of the CD7's recommendation that they will bring forward $250,000 for the implementation, so that it's all incorporated into something that comes back to us.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? So we'll move with that for formal report back in mid to end of June.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now we'll go into closed session. Why don't we do it here, man? How many?
Kick everyone out.
Are we going to have? Is the room going to clear out to where we can stay here?
Yeah. So, yeah, we can stay.
I'm going to.
We will clear it out.
Internal report relative to retention of Myers, Nave, and with an additional appropriation of $80,000 for outside counsel services related to the case entitled Mark Willits versus City of Los Angeles. My understanding that the committee has approved that.
So we'll have H and the review next week. There's two joint committees.
Item number 11, is that being continued for clarification?
Item number 11 will be continued until next week.
Thank you. You're not his friend. We're adjourned?